This is a special presentation from the Brighton Central School District Board of Education.
This evening we are scheduled to make a final review and an adoption of our 2018-2019 budget and the property tax report card. So to begin that process, I turn it over to Dr. McGowan for a budget update and review.
Thank you very much. This is cut down now to only 47 slides, so we're in good shape. I'm just kidding. This is a very quick summary, as I mentioned.
Funny guy.
There is virtually no change from what was presented in the March meeting, the last meeting when we presented the executive budget proposal to you. I will point out where revenue has changed slightly. We did receive slightly more state aid than we had budgeted for, but we were able to simply change some of our revenue projections. So the actually adopted budget we would ask you to act on tonight to prepare for taxpayers to vote on in May is not changed. That's the spending plan that is being voted on and the levy that is needed to support that spending plan. The revenue projections allowed us to change what we were using in appropriated fund balance and have slightly less of a reliance on essentially the savings account to pay for expenses into next year. But it wasn't enough aid that it could dramatically change any of our approach to spending or hiring or any of those strategies, which I'll detail for you here. So what are the things that we looked at? Again, just to quickly go through the summary of this budget at this point. We looked at our instructional leadership, professional development programs, our coaching supports, academic intervention services supports beyond the mandate, summer school offerings, class size, and course offerings at all levels, the team teaching structure at the middle school, interscholastic athletic opportunities, and all the different co-curricular opportunities for our kids, and transportation services. And in the course of that review, found some different places for efficiency, including a proposal to change our walking distance slightly at particular levels. To balance the budget, we are recommending in the executive budget proposal and for your consideration and adoption a freeze on our full-time equivalency hiring except in areas for health, safety, or security. So we have budgeted some funds if we do decide to take on any additional security measures and in some small changes in positions that are required around health and safety. We are going to be scaling our staffing based on enrollment trends, which means a reduction of a position at the elementary level, which I will detail for you in a moment. Reducing our overtime allocation also for operations and maintenance, which will have an impact on building accessibility for outside groups in the evening and weekends. Increasing our reliance on federal grants, reducing pressure on the general funds. We are budgeting some more of our work, our programs, in federal grant programs that we do receive funding. We mention that because that's a volatile area relative to what could be cut by the federal government later on. We feel comfortable right now that we're making safe bets in terms of budgeting some programming within those grants in areas that we don't see there being a reduction. And deferring slightly our planning for full-day kindergarten. That doesn't mean deferring the timeline. We will still have full-day kindergarten in 2021, but instead of encumbering additional positions in current year budget or next year's budget to help pay for that, we've reduced that type of planning going forward, which will have an impact in later budgets that we will need to address. But in this year's budget, it didn't seem to make sense to cut current programming for the sake of programming that's not on the docket yet. It's not part of our programming. We're also looking at all other expenses, implementing program caps in terms of some of the elective programming through BOCES, the OCED program, some of our co-curricular activities and extracurricular activities as well. We are going to be very carefully monitoring how many clubs we're able to offer and the interest level, looking at ways we can combine some clubs and activities where necessary, where there are still plenty of opportunities for kids, but where we might be able to be a little bit more efficient. We're going to limit our equipment budget to those that we need, the equipment we need to maintain our current program, so no new equipment for any new type of approach, and tightening up basically our budget risk provisions or the extra in lines to make sure that we don't go over budget. We're tightening up some of those risk provisions as well. And some of the funding for our future debt service. So in other words, that building into our capital reserve more money for down payment to reduce some of our debt service later on. We're deferring some of that funding as well. Same idea as the full day K planning. It doesn't make sense to have to cut program now because we're that close in terms of the aid we're receiving and the property tax cap. To cut program now in order to save money later on just didn't seem to make sense. When we can do that in other years, it's prudent budget planning, but we're not willing to sacrifice student programming for that at this point, but it'll have an implication later on we'll need to keep in mind. The class size reduction, or I'm sorry, the class size shift and the reduction in staff that I mentioned to you at the elementary level. Our fourth grade this year has 13 sections in it, 17, 18, all the way on the left. The fourth grade, so the next year's fourth graders, will be 12 sections. That same group of kids is 12 sections right now in third grade. So it's a smaller group moving. That results in one less section than at French Road. So we'll have one position change again at French Road at the elementary level. A quick word on the financial trends. If you look over time back to 2007, 2008, the blue line is the original budget, so the budget that taxpayers approved. The dotted line right under that are the actual expenditures. So that is the margin, if you will, between those two lines is what can go to fund balance, and then for the next year, help knock down the levy just a little bit. So it's the money that's left at the end of the year. So the difference between the actual expenditures and what the budget expenditures are. Our average increase in the budget since that time has only been 3%, and our average actual increase in dollars spent has been just 2.6%, and the difference between those has been able to go to fund balance. Our tax levy has only gone up an average of 2.3% over that same period of time, while state aid and federal aid has increased 3.7% over time. Keep in mind that 3.7%, although that might sound like a great number, it's actually a relatively small number compared to our even smaller numbers here in terms of our own spending and our own tax increases. It appears a little bit larger, but it includes reimbursable aids. So where we've depended more and more on the reimbursements that the state is supposed to be providing. This isn't benevolence, it's not a gift, it's the reimbursement for expenses that the state is supposed to be covering. That number has gone up as well. And then our budget fund balance and reserves have been able to increase over time of $2.7 million, which has helped us again to plan prudently for the use of fund balance towards the tax levy, but also for capital expenditures and the other areas where reserves help us stay away from using the general fund. For example, the technology reserve, which has allowed us to shift most of our technology purchasing into an area which is coming out of a savings account as opposed to out of the general fund each and every year. A quick summary of the particular objects on the spending side and a couple of the highlights. We're up in terms of, we're almost even in terms of salaries. Now that doesn't mean that people will not receive contractual increases that we've negotiated over time. It means that the number of people in those categories, because we are not adding staff, the total amount spent in the salary category will only go up 1.3%. That has nothing to do with the individual increases to salaries. That's the total spending in that line. Meanwhile, benefits will go up 5.7%. That includes the retirement system, that includes health insurance, all other benefits. The health insurance and retirement system costs are largely out of our control. The retirement system is simply billing us. We do not have a retirement program here. Those are state systems. And the health insurance, we've been able to keep that cost relatively lower. Those increases relatively small compared to community-rated plans by participating in the local consortium plans. And so the pace of that has slowed, although we're seeing an increase in the number of people participating in those plans as well. We're looking at an increase in materials and services, supplies about 9%, but that's only a $350,000 increase in a $76 million budget overall. So we feel pretty confident that in terms of the material supplies needed to do the work, that's an appropriate increase. And then on the bottom side, it's just important to point out what percentage of the budget do these expenses make up. 48% of our budget is spent on salaries, 28% on benefits. So salary and benefits overall, 75%. That's an important number to point out because we are a people business, and we want people to understand actually that that is where we are spending our money. That is where it should be going. It should be going towards the people that are working with kids each and every day to provide small class sizes, different types of approaches, differentiation of instruction. We should be investing in people, and that is where the bulk of our spending is happening, and we'd like to make sure people understand that. Some of the other budget factors, the larger increases overall, up at the top, 18.9% in the area of business administration, but only up $17,000. We spend a relatively small amount of money there, and what that is the cost of doing audits that are required by the state. And those costs increase over time. We have to catch up now when we have new arrangements for those audits or additional expenses that have happened over time due to the audits, again, that are required by mandate by the state. and so the increased spending is due to that in that line. And then our special education contracts and tuitions, these are costs that are provided to us or given to us by outside providers, whether it's BOCES or other private providers. They set the tuition. In fact, once again, I'll point out New York State helps set those tuition. They have a rate setting unit, and those costs are simply given to us. We have to pay those tuitions. We don't at all begrudge any child the need that they have, the fulfillment of that need through those programs, but it's a reality in terms of the dollar and cents. Then we get billed for that, and we should point out to people then what that cost will be. Debt service will go up just a little bit as we begin to ramp up towards our capital improvement plans, and our contract transportation by contract is going up. Those are negotiated. We saw relatively low increases in that for quite a long time. 3.3% is not outrageous by any stretch, and that's an increase going into next year. So what does that mean in terms of a proposed budget summary and the impact on the tax levy? We are requesting an increase in the budget of $2.2 million, or 2.95%. The total budget being proposed is $78,330,553. Again, that's a change of $2,247,602. The total revenues, other than the real property taxes, so excluding the tax levy, we expect to go up 4.8%. The unrestricted foundation aid coming into the district will go up $370,000, or 4.9%. And the non-property tax revenues will go up $1.2 million as well. So overall, we're requesting an increase in the real property tax levy of 2.36%, or up from $51,069,907 to $52,275,299. Again, 2.36% and tax levy compliant, which we'll point out in the tax levy report card in just a moment. Where does our revenue come from? We continue to want to point out to the community that are paying the largest share of the bill, 67%. That's why state aid has such a big impact on us. We're already paying a big bill in this community. Any lack of state aid, continued lack of state aid, just adds to an already large bill, and we're very aware of that. 67% being paid for in this community. Really important to remind people of the foundation aid issue of the last several years, because many people would have thought, due to the really great work and advocacy done in this community by Fight for Brighton, by you as school board members, by many people here internally, our state aid went up, and our problem, so to speak, or our issue that we had brought to the attention of our legislators was addressed in part, and what it meant was that by percentage we are receiving a larger share of what we are due, but what we are due is the entire bar on this bar chart, the orange and the blue. We're only receiving the blue. But if you see where it says $1.1 million, that's where the additional fix last year was added to our base. It got us to a better place. We are still far underfunded relative to what we should be getting. We're just now in a very similar place to our neighbors who are also being underfunded relative to what people should be getting in foundation aid. It helped the problem, it didn't fix the problem, I think, is the overall point. The larger problem is a statewide issue now that everybody is experiencing. So this is an addition to the last one. The resulting tax rate and the impact of the town reassessment is something that we wanted to point out. The tax levy, just to give people a quick primer again on each of these definitions, the levy is the amount of the money that the board, you, are allowed to raise in the community based on voter approval. So the levy is the amount that you can go out and collect from the community based on property value. The rate is the share of the levy that each taxpayer will pay. So that's the actual dollar per thousand that is applied to the value of your home to come up with your individual tax bill. Everybody's home and their property has a different value. And depending on the number of thousands of dollars that your property is worth, the rate is applied to that value in order to get your tax bill. Our rate, you as a board will not collect a penny more in levy than what the voters approve. It's a question of how the bill gets divided up among property owners. It gets divided up based on your assessment. If your assessment overall in the town is to go down, the rate has to go up in order to mathematically accomplish the same amount of total collection of dollars. The assessments in town went up. The rate will go down. We will still be collecting the same amount of money in the tax levy. So when voters approve the tax levy, hopefully in May, they are approving the same dollar amount, no matter what their individual value is on their home, the same total value. So the assessed values we don't set, the town sets those, and people have a process for challenging that and working through that with the town. But the rate will be lower if one's assessment has gone up. We don't know the rate yet until the total value of the property in town is given to us. And we don't know that until late in the year. So in previous years, we've had a general sense of what the property values would be, and we could tell people approximately in this town or in this town, this is generally what you're going to pay, this is your rate per thousand, and people had a pretty good handle on the value of their home. Now that assessments have been redone and assessments are in question, we can't give an assumed rate because the total value in the town has not been determined yet. As soon as we know that, we will very much like to pass that along. So again, a further illustration of the town reevaluation, the tax levy will go up 2.36%. Equalized increase in taxable assessment in the town of Brighton will go up 11%, but the net impact on the combined tax rate is a rate reduction of 8.6%, so a reduction. Again, the rate will go down as the values go up. We are not applying on a much higher value, so if people are worried about a higher value in their home, which many people are, they said all of a sudden I've got this much higher value, the rate will not be the same as it was last year, and then your tax bill will go up that much more as a consequence. That will not happen. Your rate will go down if your value went up. So the total spending proposal again is $78.33 million, or up 2.95%. We believe, by way of summary, that this is responsibly controlling our increases in spending, but that it will not harm our educational program, and that it also reflects our continued investment in all of the priority areas in the blueprint: safety, security, wellness, rigorous coursework for all students, creativity and innovation, instructional technology, and diversity and equity. It is also tax cap compliant, 2.36% proposed increase in the tax levy. So what does that get you for the investment? Really important question for a consumer to be asking, and we recognize that people are consumers. A 97% graduation rate for all Brighton students in the class of 2017. On average, Brighton students score almost 200 points higher on the SAT scores than other New York State public schools. 84% of Brighton graduates in class of 2017 went on to 2- and 4-year colleges, and 74% received a Regents diploma with advanced distinction. Our high school offers more than 20 advanced placement courses, and in 2017 that meant that 418 students wrote 975 exams. 90% of those exams scored a 3 or higher, then hopefully providing college credit in many colleges and universities across the country. The middle school was designated as a school to watch for the 5th time. Brighton High School recognized as a high-performing reward school by the state. The high school also nominated for the National Blue Ribbon Award. Unique high school electives: energy, sustainability, video gaming, sports, entertainment, marketing, comparative religions, etc., and challenging academic opportunities like the Super program, which is an advanced placement program, or dual college credit programs. We had 7 semifinalists in the 2018 National Merit Scholarship Competition and 6 commended students. Top honors in several categories for all 3 high school publications from the Empire State Scholastic Press Association. Pretty great, a value on the dollar, we think, for the investment our community is making. A well-rounded education as well. 9th consecutive year designated as one of the best communities for music education. More than 2,000 students, grades 4 through 12, participate in our choral and instrumental music program. 2,600 students, visual performing arts programs. 250 participate in honors assemblies. 1,500 student roster slots on 72 athletic teams. Scholar Athlete Team awards throughout our athletic program, and a variety of competitions, academic, based at both the middle and the high school, like FBLA, EQ, Fair Speech and Debate, DECA, Model UN, Masterminds. More than 85 clubs at the middle and high school, and the full continuum of services for our students, including things like the AIM program, which has been a very successful alternative program for our students, very differentiated program, our GOLD program, the KEEP, or the Extended Education Program for kindergarten students who need something different and extra. Outdoor education in 6th grade continues after several decades in action. field trips that enhance their curriculum and provide real-world experiences, literacy math coaching support, the non-mandated AIS support, all these things we talked about at the beginning of the presentation are still protected in this budget. 21st century technology, extended studies opportunities, 21st century learning spaces being piloted throughout the district, instrumental music starting in 4th grade, which is very rare relative to our neighbors, excuse me, and anywhere in New York State, 6th grade foreign language, just not offered other places, elementary and high school summer school programs, and the morning shows at Frez, the middle school and the high school. So quite a bit for your dollar. We think people are getting a great return on their investment. There's only one student in the room, so if we can provide and do these great things and have a result like Piper Davis, then everybody should vote for the budget, because look at this great kid and what's happened. She started pretty great too, though. She did really well no matter what we did. Let's face it, Piper's pretty fantastic out of that. So the property tax report card that we do need to point out to the community, important to make note of new requirements, do call for an addition to the annual property tax report card to show a schedule of reserve funds as follows. So without me reading them all to you, this is posted online. It's part of the property tax report card that you will receive also at home, but something that we want to make sure that we make note of, the change in the property tax report card, and that this information is all available to the community, and that you, the board, have been presented with this as well. And then there's a withdrawal from our capital reserve fund. We will ask voters for approval to do this. The current balance is over $8.5 million. We'd like to withdraw $1.5 million to reauthorize the chiller project at the middle school that came in way over bid several years ago. We have to go back and ask the community again for the opportunity to do that. And then construction of alterations, renovations throughout the buildings, and transfer to the capital reserve funds, again, to further our plan to reduce our debt service payments over time based on the May referendum last year. And acquisition and installation in and around the foregoing improvements of original furnishings, equipment, machinery, and apparatus. So essentially the motion task for opportunity to withdraw $1.5 million for capital expenses. And then out of the technology reserve fund, the current balance is $1.5 million. We'd like to withdraw $500,000 to continue the implementation of our 21st century learning programs. That includes 8th grade tablets, digital infrastructure throughout the district, storage for our virtual servers, additional staff laptop requirements, and this is the regular cycling through. That's the only machine that our staff members use. That is their workstation. CAD lab replacement at the high school and device replacements K through 7, and then AV replacements throughout the district as well. We'd also like to propose the withdrawal of $125,000 from a bus purchase reserve set up several years ago, and we did look at the opportunity to look at our own bus fleet. We've since determined that's not feasible, but the voters did approve a limited reserve at that point. We'd like to ask now for permission to use some of that money towards the purchase of 3 passenger vans that could be used for educational programs and extracurricular programs, both the transition program at St. John Fisher, but also field trips, co-curricular activities, and interscholastic activities. Those passenger vans will have plenty of seating for smaller groups. That would be very helpful to have that type of flexibility. Hopefully we'll save money over time in terms of our contract transportation as well. We'd also like to ask the community for their approval to establish home-to-school eligibility distances for school bus transportation, changing our grades kindergarten to 2 to 1/8 of a mile. Currently it's a 1/4 mile, so in fact shrinking that zone. It's really much more in line though with what our practice is. When kids are that close, we are continuing in the neighborhoods around the elementary buildings to pick up, feeling that that's the safest thing to do, but we'd like the official permission from the community to do that by referendum. And grades 3 through 5, a 1/4 mile. There's no change to that. Grades 6 through 12, 3/4 of a mile. Grade 6 is currently a 1/4 mile, and grades 7 through 12 are 3/4 of a mile. We have no idea why this is a historical issue, and we could never change it because in a strange quirk of state law requires a voter referendum to change your walking distances. So we'd like to be consistent now with 6th graders in the building that they're with 7th and 8th graders who have a 3/4 mile walking distance, feeling that that is both healthy and appropriate for them to do that. Any questions for me?
Anything? No. Emphatically. Thank you very much, Kevin. I think, as you mentioned to start out, what you've presented and proposed and what we're about to vote on is pretty much where we've been for quite a while now. We are appreciative of the work of the State Assembly, the State Senate, and the Governor, at the end of the day, to come up with a little bit more money for us. Joe Morelli, certainly, and Joe Robach, we appreciate their efforts. You and I both were in touch with them quite a bit leading up to that, not only on the funding side, but there were a number of issues with regard to education policy and education law that were in play right up to the end that really we felt were counterproductive, and most of those did not get included in the budget, so we're appreciative of their efforts around that. We do look forward to working continuously with them moving forward on the full funding of foundation aid, which would put us all in much better place, and it would remove or at least lessen the overriding burden on local property taxpayers in Brighton, which we continue to strive to make that happen. So we want to start out by saying that on the revenue side. I think you and our leadership team, cabinet leadership team, our entire staff have done an excellent job of working through this. Certainly Lou deserves extra credit and extra announcement with regard to taking a look at every single item we could to make sure that program is affected in the very least, if at all, and that we're able to continue to do new and better and ever higher under difficult circumstances. So we're thankful and appreciative of everybody's effort on that. And I think as we move forward here, we're very proud of this budget. It does keep us under the property tax cap again. It's fiscally responsible, but moreover, it is responsive to the community, to our families and our children, to continue to provide what we know is a Brighton education. So thank you, and we will move forward now. And I will remind the public that there are multiple opportunities to hear more about the budget. If you'd like to take advantage of that slideshow again, it's also available online. And we next meet here on April 24th, and we'll probably have some discussion that evening also. And then just a reminder, everything we're doing right now leads up to the May 15th vote. So.
And spaghetti dinner.
Yeah, I was just going to say, and spaghetti dinner.
And the spaghetti dinner. Well, we'll have time to continue to, I'm on a budget roll right now, but the spaghetti dinner also.
Dinner
Yes,
is
I'm
very
sorry.
important.
Al Lewis.
No, and again, thank you very much to Lou for his leadership, and to each of the principals here, and Dr. Baker, Mr. Avidu for their work to really put together a very good spending plan going forward next year that we hope the voters will see the same way.
And protective of the future, too. And we've talked about that going way back to the fall when we first started this year's effort. You know, we've got a lot coming up with our K-12 facilities project, all the capital project work, the debt service load that we're going to take on in the fairly short term. And so the prudent management of everything that we're working on is going to help us in the long term, as we planned for when we put the capital project out to vote last year to the public. So thank you. And speaking of the public, in addition to PTSA meetings and the buildings coming up, you know, Kevin and I'll join you. We'll do presentations at Kiwanis, at Rotary, and at the Chamber, and anyone else who will have us to talk about the budget. So.
Anybody who doesn't run the other way.
That's exactly right. Anywhere where you can plug in a projector, sit down, we'll give you a presentation. Thank you very much.
This has been a special presentation from the Brighton Central School District Board of Education.